You know, when we think of the Christmas story, we usually picture that silent, peaceful night in the manger. But the thing is, that's just the opening scene. What happened right after that is the part we don't always hear about, and it transforms this quiet little story into a high-stakes thriller, full of dark prophecies, a paranoid king, and a life-or-death escape. So get this, just 40 days after Jesus is born, his mother Mary hears these words. This is not exactly congratulations on the baby. It's a warning. And it's the very first sign that this child's life is going to cause not just joy, but incredible pain. This is where the story really gets going. So you might be asking, why are they at the temple in the first place? Well, 40 days after the birth, Mary and Joseph head to the main temple in Jerusalem. This wasn't some casual visit. They were there to perform a really important religious duty, one that was required by Jewish law for every firstborn son. And this law goes way back, like all the way back to the book of Exodus. It involved making a small offering to redeem or buy back the firstborn. But here's the detail that tells you everything. Their offering. They bring 2 pigeons. This was the specific option allowed for families who couldn't afford a lamb. So the story is subtly telling us right from the jump, this is a poor family. They have almost nothing. And it's here in the temple that they run into these 2 amazing people, Simeon and Anna. They're both very old, deeply faithful, and they have literally been waiting their entire lives for this exact moment. Now the writer, Luke, he's clever. He puts them together for a very specific reason. Under Jewish law, you needed 2 witnesses to confirm that something was true. So he's essentially building a legal case, right in front of us, witness by witness, that this baby is the real deal. Okay, so let's shift gears. While this quiet, profound moment is happening in the temple, something much louder is unfolding. We've got these mysterious scholars from a faraway land who've been following a star for who knows how long, and their journey is about to crash right into the halls of power. All right, before we go any further, we have to bust a few myths. That whole 3 kings at the manger thing on Christmas cards? Yeah, not quite. First, 3 of them? The Bible never gives a number. Could have been 2, could have been a whole crew. Kings? No. They were more like ancient astronomers, wise men, or scholars. And they didn't visit a newborn in a stable. They actually found a young child, maybe even a toddler, living in a regular house. So these scholars, they get to Jerusalem and they do what seems logical. They go to the palace. But this turns out to be a catastrophic mistake. They walk into the court of the current king and ask this question. I mean, can you imagine? You just don't walk up to a powerful ruler and ask where to find his replacement. This wasn't a question, it was a political bomb, and it just landed at the feet of the most dangerous man in the region. And that dangerous man is King Herod the Great. Now, Herod was a brilliant builder, but he was also deeply, deeply paranoid. I mean, pathologically insecure and ruthless. So the news that some new king of the Jews has supposedly been born doesn't just annoy him, it terrifies him. For a guy obsessed with holding onto his power, this is a direct threat to his very existence. And just to give you a picture of what we're dealing with, even the Roman emperor, Caesar Augustus, had a famous line about him. And you can see why. This is a man who had already executed his own wife and 3 of his sons because he suspected they might be after his throne, his own family. And this is the guy who just heard a baby might be his replacement. Herod doesn't waste any time. He puts a plan into motion, and it is just chillingly clever. First, he calls in his own religious experts. Where's this Messiah supposed to be born? They tell him Bethlehem. Check. Then he pulls the Magi aside for a secret meeting to find out the exact time the star appeared. He's trying to calculate the child's age. And then comes the big lie. He sends them off saying, "Go find him, and when you do, come back and tell me so I can go and worship him too." Yeah, right. We all know worship is the last thing on his mind. So the Magi, none the wiser, follow the star to the house, and they present their famous gifts. But the gifts themselves, they tell a story. Gold, well, that's for a king, obviously. Frankincense was a special incense used by priests in the temple. And then there's myrrh, a fragrant resin used to prepare bodies for burial. Think about that. Without even knowing it, their gifts basically foreshadowed his entire identity. A king, a priest, and someone who was born to die. But then, the Magi get a warning in a dream. Do not go back to Herod. So they listen, and they head home by a different route. Now, this is a moment of divine intervention, right? The child is saved. But this very act of deliverance is what sends Herod completely over the edge. It triggers all his paranoia and unleashes a furious, horrifying reaction. This is where the story takes its darkest turn. And just look at how fast this all happens. The pace is frantic. An angel comes to Joseph in a dream with a terrifyingly direct message: "Get up, Herod is coming to kill the child." There's no waiting for morning. They get up and flee to Egypt in the middle of the night. Their escape was on a razor's edge, because the second Herod realizes the Magi tricked him, his rage just boils over. And what Herod does next is just unthinkable. It's known today as the massacre of the innocents. He orders his soldiers to go through Bethlehem and kill every single baby boy aged 2 and under. For the families of that small town, the arrival of this new king brought nothing but unimaginable grief. It's a brutal reminder that the arrival of this light in the world was met immediately by the deepest and most violent darkness. So after all that, the prophecies, the chase, the escape, the tragedy, what are we supposed to take away from it all? If you look beneath the drama of the story, you start to see a few really powerful themes emerge, ideas that will pop up again and again. First, there's this stunning irony. Herod's own chief priests and scholars, the ultimate insiders, they knew exactly where the Messiah was supposed to be born. They quoted the prophecy, pointed to Bethlehem, and then they did absolutely nothing. They just stayed in Jerusalem. The very people who should have been first in line completely missed it. And in contrast, look who did find him. The Magi, foreigners, outsiders from a pagan land who traveled for months, all because they saw a star and wanted to know more. This whole pattern of the insiders being blind and the outsiders being the ones to really see is a theme you're going to see play out over and over again. And finally, maybe the most sobering truth of all. From Simeon's prophecy about a sword piercing Mary's soul to Herod's horrific massacre of children, this story makes one thing crystal clear. Jesus' arrival was not a peaceful event. It was seen as disruptive. It was seen as a threat. And right from the very beginning, the powers of the world met his arrival with immediate and brutal violence. So at the end of this whole ordeal, Jesus is a refugee living in Egypt. Eventually, the family will return. And the very next time we see Jesus in the story, he's 12 years old, and he's right back where we started, in the temple in Jerusalem. Only this time, he's the one astonishing the teachers and starting to show the world who he really is. And that's exactly where we'll pick things up in our next explainer.